Alright, let's talk about Nigel. There's an exercise that a lot of puppeteers do when they're training or practicing called bare hand puppetry, which is basically what it sounds like. It is puppetry, but without a puppet. You often use these, which are just a couple of ping pong balls with some dots on them. And this is so, in the monitor here, this is so you can practice eye focus, which is, simply letting the audience know exactly where your character is looking. One of the most important skills to master. But the reason you do bare hand puppetry like this is because every subtle thing you do is immediately transmitted to the audience, and you can see everything. So little tiny subtle movements you immediately see, and you get a much more nuanced performance, and you get a much clearer understanding of exactly what it is you as a puppeteer are doing. Now, if you were to take this form, cover it in fabric, give it a defined mouth that follows the contours of the fingers, you end up with something a little bit like this. Now, does this begin to look at all familiar to you? One of the brilliant things in the Kermit design is, of course, his simplicity. In the hands of a talented puppeteer like Jim Henson or Steve Whitmire or Matt Vogel, that character just comes to life and is so unbelievably expressive, despite the fact that it's unbelievably simple. I mean, Kermit's basically a sock puppet. But because there is so little between the performer and the audience, every little thing that the performer does is immediately seen. And so because of this, Kermit has become kind of the apex puppet for both puppeteers and audiences, because it's easy for an audience to fall in love with a character that is so expressive, and it's unbelievably fun for a puppeteer to perform a character that is that expressive. Now, of course, Kermit the Frog is a wholly owned copyright of the Disney Corporation. There's no way I could ever have Kermit in the show. I don't think I could perform well enough to do justice to Kermit anyway. It's a moot point. However, I'm like every other puppeteer. I would love to have something like Kermit in the show, just because they're so fun to perform. And then one day, I was just browsing social media, as you do, and I came across a posting on Instagram from Prairie Puppets, who was selling a cute little frog character who's called Sherman, and who is a tropical frog. So this is definitely not Kermit, but very reminiscent of the Kermit form. And that, of course, got me thinking, I wonder if I can come up with a way of differentiating the character enough from Kermit so that it's clearly not Kermit, but yet still retain some of the niceness of the Kermit form. And so I got in touch with Prairie Puppets and worked with Kaylee from Prairie Puppets, who is fantastic to work with. Shoutouts, Kaylee. And together we kind of came up with a way of even further differentiating this character from Kermit. So the first thing I thought of was, of course, well, he's not even a frog. He's a newt, because he still has that amphibian look, so I needed something frog adjacent. So newt seemed like a good option. And because he's a newt, I wanted a name that has some alliteration. So I thought of the name Nigel. Now, being a child of the 80s, the first thing I think of when I hear the word Nigel is the XTC song Making Plans for Nigel. Of course, XTC being a very British band, got me thinking about British things, and I realized I hadn't done a character with any kind of UK accent in the show yet. One of the few accents I haven't used in the show. So then it came down to, okay, so we've got a character named Nigel the Newt with a British accent. I immediately started thinking about my favorite author, the late, great Terry Pratchett, and the idea of making him a watchman, because the accent I was planning on was a kind of pseudo Cockney accent, which is very much what Nobby Nobbs in the City Guard talks like, him and Gaspo the Wonder Dog. He's kind of a mishmash of the two. And then that got me thinking, well, wait a minute, if he's from the City Guard, he's from the same video game that the Oracle's from. And of course, the Oracle is the one that turned him into a newt. And suddenly we had this huge elaborate backstory for this character that was so far away from Kermit that I thought, oh, well, this is perfectly fine then. I could absolutely use this. So I worked with Kaylee from Prairie Puppets and came up with some design aspects that further differentiated the character from Kermit. So eyelids, no collar, the dots in the back of his head. And so I thought, well, there's absolutely no way that this is ever going to be confused with Kermit. But of course, his silhouette and Kermit's silhouette are very similar. So of course I ended up just addressing it directly and turning Nigel's vague Kermitness into a joke on the show. And I think it worked out pretty well. I don't think I've had more compliments on any other episode quite as much as I've had on the Nigel episode. So y'all seem to like Nigel, and he's so much fun for me to perform. I think out of all of the puppets that I own, and there's some you can't see because they haven't been introduced in the show yet, and I don't want to keep them. I want to keep them as spoiler free as possible. But there's some really cool puppets coming up. I think out of all of them, he's the one that I enjoy performing the most, just because of his expressiveness. I'm sorry, Oracle. I'm sorry. It's true. Nigel is my most fun puppet to perform. So that means, yeah, you're going to be seeing a whole lot more of Nigel. Well, that's all for now, I think, and I hope to see you again soon. Is it alright? It's alright. Well, it's alright.